I found out that there are these chestnuts that have been produced in the region for thousands of years, literally, and I really wanted to engage myself with them and to see if they still were. Basically, I stumbled upon one of the most beautiful examples of this, of like humans feeding themselves, trying to exist in humility with nature and a very healthy respect to fundamentally feed themselves through the winter in such extreme places and remote places like the forest. So I found a man in Graglia, which is a small mountain village, through a contact of mine. I went to meet him after getting his phone number. And he said, meet me in the car park of Graglia, which is a little mountain village. So I drove to Graglia, and then he says, I'll be in a white Jeep. That's all I've got to go on. I'm kind of waiting there with my big camera in case I'd like to take pictures, realize that it's really obnoxious, and actually I put it away, and it's not about pictures, it's about engaging in the moment. This guy genuinely, in an amazing 80s Jeep, which is white, did one of these incredible speed bump jolts, and actually I heard the tire sort of screech when he came to a halt next to my car. So Davide Valcauda is an amazing man. He's got kind of like blonde tousled hair and really twinkly blue eyes, and a really healthy grin. And he's got a complete ski suit onesie, which is faded highlighter yellow and purple. And then he gets out and he hands me 2 big bags, paper bags. And he hands me them with a big grin, like a really proud grin. So inside, basically, the story of the chestnuts is so inspiring for me because around October, chestnuts fall to the ground. Little spiny casings they have. And for generations, hundreds of years, families would go up into the forest and gather as many as they could. Sometimes they've got enormous branches that they whack the things down with. Really incredible sense of community there as well, because they know that there's this huge yield from nature that they have to take because the opportunity is there. So every waking moment of the day is all about harvesting these chestnuts. They tread on the chestnuts or use these handmade rakes to extract the actual chestnut from the spiky casing. The spiky casings, they then dig huge holes all through the forest, which is wild, and bury the casings. This will basically break down and become mulch and feed the trees, which will increase the yield of chestnuts the following year. Sometimes, traditionally, you would take these spiny casings and boil them in water for 20 minutes. You then take the water and add it to your bath. That would be an old remedy, which was for people with rheumatism, or it would be healing your bones. If you had a fracture, it would be good for that. Also, they take the leaves and they make a tea as an antidepressant. They'll make a tincture with the buds and also use that as an antidepressant. This is all coming up through the winter, which is the toughest time of year, which is when you actually need this. So then they will take the chestnuts and then put them in a tiny little shed, which is made with the stone from around the forest and the mountain, which on the top floor, with chestnut beams, with tiny gaps in the middle, they put up to 300 kilos of these chestnuts they've harvested. Now, beneath, they will make a fire. That fire has to be tended for 40 days. So families would go and move into a shed and live around a fire because the smoke is actually penetrating the shells of the chestnuts and begins to dry them out. What's incredible is that what they used to smoke the chestnuts with, because smoke is a preservation technique as well as drying and heat, you then use the previous year's broken casings of the chestnuts to smother the fire and create smoke to preserve the chestnuts. So after 40 days, another incredible communal activity happens where you fill sort of brown Hessian sacks with the chestnuts that are now dry. You take a big stone, or you go to a big stone or a tree stump, stretch a piece of leather over it, and then everybody in rhythm would bash the bags to crack the shells and then release the kernel inside, which at this point is dry and wrinkly. So then each individual kernel will be, well, it gets threshed with baskets which are handmade specifically for the job. So they'll be able to perform a certain action where the wind takes the broken casings away, leaving only the kernel. Then each individual kernel is harvested and graded. The crumbly bits, the bits with worms, they all go to feed the animals. And then the rest of them all get stashed into bags. And they're so dry at this point that it will feed the entire community for the whole winter. It's called bread of the trees, which I find really profound. So this guy, Davide, he hands me these bags. And then the one thing he says to me is like, "Annusa, annusa," which is smell, smell. And I was like, "Oh no, you're grand. How much do I owe you?" He's like, "Annusa." So he bids me open the bag. And then I open the bag and then I smell what's inside. And the smokiness, after having researched what it takes to get this, just blew my mind, because I could picture families tending the fire, and it was mainly women who would do this, you know, in amazing, like, beautiful big aprons made with local hemp, little patterns that are totally unnecessary, but why not make something beautiful if you can? And I just pictured all of these activities going through the generations, and it was so incredible to find that in these tiny little things. So then basically that was incredibly impactful for me, because he was really proud about what he'd done. And it was so sad to learn that he was the last person doing this. The whole of that little area, the forest going up to the mountain, is dotted with these little gra, which are these buildings, and they're not being used anymore.